I love Pokemon. Now I know this confession will surprise literally no one, but I don't think there's any better way to start this. For over 2/3 of my life, Pokemon has been with me. From when I was 6 years old watching new episodes of Diamond and Pearl on Cartoon Network, to my teenage years competing in trading card game tournaments, to now, still watching the series every week and occasionally putting my thoughts out on the internet. There really is no other series so integral to my everyday life, and I will never not love talking about it. But one of my absolute favorite aspects of the series has always been the anime. Now, I'm not going to act like I've seen every episode, or even that it's among some of the best anime series out there, but it doesn't matter. The Pokemon anime could always be something I could count on continuing. For literally my entire life and beyond, the adventures of Ash Ketchum coexisted with my own. I still remember watching my first episode. I was homesick from school, and while I owned some of the Pokemon books and toys, I really wasn't that familiar with the franchise. My dad had recorded some episodes of Battle Dimension on our DVR, which is a sentence that makes me feel ancient. While I'm not 100% sure what the first episode I watched was, it was part of the Wallace Cup arc, which I remember because I thought May was a standard part of the Diamond and Pearl cast, only to later be shocked to learn this wasn't the case, and there was a whole 4 seasons prior starring her. Now, I do remember the first episode I watched when I wasn't sick, that being Doc Brock. It's the one where the gang has to help Pachirisu with its illness, which I am just now seeing the irony in. Eventually though, I would move past just watching recordings, and by the time Sinnoh League Victors was beginning, I was all caught up. I still remember seeing Ash finally take down Paul during the episode's US premiere. It was truly one of the best moments in the series. And of course there was the hype of next week's episode, where Ash would be taking on Tobias and his Darkrai, except I already knew what was gonna happen. By this point, I had become pretty familiar with the internet, and I would use sources such as Bulbapedia and Cerebi to learn as much about Pokemon as I could. I basically relied on it to learn what would happen for the first 10 seasons, and if there was an episode I really wanted to watch, I would look for it on the Pokemon website's TV section. And if it wasn't there, I knew another website where it would definitely be, along with every other episode in the series. As a kid, I always wondered why Pokemon would put their episodes up there, but not their own website, which I know now was not something they were doing. But through this research, I learned something pretty interesting. Japan was quite a bit ahead of us. While I would still watch the episodes dubbed as they aired in the US, and I would try to avoid spoilers for things like leagues, I would certainly take a peek at what we'd be getting. For basically all of Best Wishes, I knew what was going to happen months in advance. After Dawn returned in Japan, I remember doing the math to figure out when this episode would air in the States. And trust me, I was the first to tell everyone at school how Ash's Charizard would be coming back. Now, I eventually stopped watching every new episode as XY was airing, and ironically, it was because I started competing more seriously in Pokemon trading card game tournaments. So most weekends were either at competitions or preparing for them, and I was rarely home on Saturday mornings anymore. I would still use Bulbapedia to keep up with what was happening, but watching every new episode was no longer a priority of mine. Until... As XYZ began airing in Japan, I kept seeing people talk about it non-stop, how this was the most mature Pokemon season, and how it was a lot darker and Ash was acting more like a grown-up. And as a 13-year-old who was clearly going through a phase and thought Fairy Tail was the pinnacle of animation, I just couldn't wait. I had to see these new episodes. And so, I officially made the jump from dub to sub. I remember being so invested in the Team Flare arc, wondering just how Pokemon could top this. Now, I don't think it'll come as much of a surprise that I really did not like Sun and Moon when it started airing. Now, I would watch the series on and off, and I did enjoy some parts like the Nebby arc, but like, look how they massacred my boy. I clearly had no concept of how animation worked, huh? It was around this time that my interest in the Pokemon anime began to decline, and I not only stopped watching, but I didn't even really keep up with the show. I thought my time with the series had concluded, but man, I could not have been more wrong. See, I had recently started a YouTube channel, just as a place where I could talk about my interests, mainly Pokemon. Keep in mind at this point, I had already competed in several TCG World Championships, so I knew what I was talking about. And one day, I would upload a pretty awful video ranking each of the Pokemon anime series, and for some reason, this video just blew up. I remember seeing my sub count finally reach 300 on my 17th birthday, and a week later, it had already surpassed 1,000. I had just accidentally become an anime PokeTuber, and I didn't even watch the show. I knew this wouldn't do, so I caught up as soon as I possibly could. It was around this time I went to Japan, and I would watch episodes of Sun and Moon in the hotel before everyone else was awake. And you know what I realized? This show was really good. Saying I was too quick to judge initially would be a massive understatement. By the time Ash won the Alola League, I was all caught up and more invested than I had ever been before. Of course, it wasn't long before Journey started airing, making it the first Pokemon series to fully air with me as a content creator. My adventure with the Pokemon anime may have been a rocky one at times, but I loved watching each new Journeys episode and sharing my thoughts with an audience of my own. And today, a brand new episode aired, the final episode. Now, of course, I know Pokemon isn't truly ending, and trust me, I am so excited for this new series. But Pokemon as in the adventures of Ash and Pikachu is actually coming to an end. I remember being young and wondering if the end of Pokemon would even occur in my lifetime. I certainly didn't expect it to come when I was only 20 years old. The final aim to be a Pokemon Master arc was a serviceable epilogue, and trust me, I could talk for a while about that. But I don't think anyone will argue that it didn't really feel like a conclusion. Which is fair, that wasn't its goal. The conclusion came with Ash defeating Leon. Everything afterwards was, like I said, an epilogue. But all of a sudden, one final episode, and it's over. Admittedly, my mind hasn't been as focused on this as it could. As this video goes up, I'm currently attending PAX East, with multiple games I've worked on being showcased, so I haven't really been able to give Ash and Pikachu the attention they deserve right now, but trust me, I'll think of something. A good friend left me today, and I'll miss him every day, but I know we'll always be friends. Forever.